Tim's giving us free speech everywhere, so we're good. Hold the roll.
The Senate will come to order. That was good. Mr. Carpenter, will you please take the roll?
Senators Aguilar. Aguilar.
Absent.
Baumgartner. Cook. Coram. Court. Crowder. Donovan. Finberg. Fields. Garcia. Gardner. Guzman. Hill. Holbert. John. Jones. Kagan. Kafalis. Kerr. Lambert. Lundberg. Marble. Martinez Humenic. Martinez Humenic. Merrifield. Moreno. Neville. Priola. Priola.
Absent.
Scott. Smallwood. Sonnenberg.
Here. Good morning.
Tate.
Used.
Todd. Williams. Zinzinger. Aguilar. President Grantham.
Excused. Oh, that could have been fun. With 33 present, 2 excused, we have a quorum. Senator Gardner, where art thou?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. Please join me and our friends in the lobby as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Senator Smallwood.
So we'll get down to there and then move out of order to do resolution.
Mr. President, I move that the reading of the journal for Thursday, February 2nd, 2017 be dispensed with and the journal be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the motion is adopted. Reports of committee reference. Oops, let me do one thing real quick. Announcement. The following change of bill sponsorship will occur. Senator Fields will be added as joint prime sponsor on Senate Joint Resolution 10 with Senator Sonnenberg and Representative Lawrence. Reports of committees of reference.
February 2nd, 2017, Committee on Finance. After consideration of the Mayor's Committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 113 be referred to Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. February 2nd, 2017, Committee on Finance. After consideration of the Mayor's Committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 9 be amended as follows, and as so amended be referred to Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation.
Senate Services.
Correctly engrossed, Senate Bill 17.
Message from the House.
The House has passed on third reading and transmitted the revised statutes, House Bill 1025, 1032, 1073, 1074. The House has passed on third reading and transmitted the revised statutes, House Bill 1011, amended as printed in the House Journal February 1st, 2017. House Bill 1034, amended as printed in the House Journal February 1st, 2017. House Bill 1056, amended as printed in the House Journal February 1st, 2017.
Message from the reviser.
We herewith transmit without comment House Bill 1025, 1032, 1073, and 1074. Without comment as amended, House Bill 1011, 1034, and 1056.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate proceed out of order for consideration of resolutions to include SJR 10 and SJR 11.
Question before us is to proceed out of order to resolutions. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. We will indeed proceed out of order.
Mr. Carpenter, would you please read the title to SJR 10?
Senate Joint Resolution 10 by Senator Sonnenberg and Fields and Representative Lawrence concerning the designation of February 4th as Missing Persons Day in Colorado.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. We move Senate Joint Resolution 10 and ask that the selections be read.
Senate Joint Resolution 10 by Senators Sonnenberg and Fields and Representative Lawrence concerning the designation of February 4th as Missing Persons Day in Colorado. Whereas each year, hundreds of thousands of families are faced with what President Ronald Reagan called the stark terror of a unique tragedy, a missing family member. And whereas every 40 seconds someone goes missing in America, approximately 2,300 Americans are reported missing every day, and there are as many as 90,000 active missing person cases in the United States at any given time. And whereas in 2014, the FBI's National Crime Information Center logged 466,949 reports of missing children. By December 31st, 2014, the FBI reported 89,924 active missing persons in the United States, with more than half being juveniles under the age of 21. And whereas children and adults go missing from their families for a number of devastating reasons, they run away or wander and become lost, they disappear under circumstances indicating that their disappearance may not have been voluntary, or they go missing under suspicious circumstances indicating that they may be in physical danger or the victims of foul play. And whereas in 2002, Colorado Governor Bill Owens signed House Bill 1083 establishing the AMBER, America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response Alert Program in Colorado, named after 9-year-old Amber Hagerman, who was abducted and killed in Texas in 1996. The program ensures that local law enforcement agencies can use the emergency alert system in Colorado to broadcast information to alert citizens of missing children. And whereas since 1996, Amber Alerts have successfully recovered 800 children nationally, and whereas for all the important work done to recover missing children, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children lists 72 missing Coloradan children from every area of the state. All disappeared from their families when they were children, and some have been missing for decades. And whereas, while too many families grieve and hope for their missing children, others are in search for their missing family members of all ages. And whereas, according to the Alzheimer's Association, 6 in 10 people with Alzheimer's or dementia will wander and may become lost, a frequent and frightening challenge for their caregivers and families. And whereas in 2007, Colorado Governor Bill Ritter signed House Bill 1005 into law, which expanded the Silver Alert program for senior citizens to include people with developmental disabilities, to connect caretakers with law enforcement officials who can use the reach of the radio and television stations and other media to alert the community. And whereas the awareness of citizens, media, and law enforcement, as well as their support, their efforts, and their search for missing persons must continue. And whereas the public plays a critical role in the success of the Amber and Silver Alert programs, they become the eyes and the ears of law enforcement and can be on the lookout for the missing person. And whereas the common misconception that a person must be absent for at least 24 hours before being legally classified as missing is dangerous. When there is evidence of violence or of an unusual absence, it is critical that an investigation begin promptly. And whereas new advances in technology must be utilized and made available to locate the missing. And whereas the state of Colorado is committed to the safety and well-being of its citizens, both children and adults. And whereas the designation of Missing Persons Day in Colorado will firmly embed the importance of missing persons and their families and friends in our state calendar and will raise a level of awareness with other cities and states that have already designated a Missing Persons Day. And whereas the designation of Missing Persons Day in Colorado offers a platform to plan events that will connect families with resources to help identify and find their long-term missing loved ones. And whereas the designation of Missing Persons Day in Colorado will ensure that the families and friends of the missing know that they are not alone in this tragedy of uncertainties and lack of closure, which leads to extreme suffering and long-lasting effects on the health, finances, and relationships of those left behind. And whereas every missing person is someone's son or daughter, father or mother, brother or sister, partner or friend, and every missing person deserves to be searched for and found. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate of the 71st General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that we, the members of the General Assembly, recognize the epidemic of the missing in America as the silent mass disaster and empathize with the ongoing suffering of the families and friends of those who are missing. That we recognize the importance of raising awareness of the numbers of people who go missing in Colorado each year. That we applaud the committed efforts of families, law enforcement agencies, and concerned citizens who work to locate missing persons. That we encourage the continued support of worthy initiatives and private and public programs to increase efforts to locate missing persons. That we hereby designate February 4th of each year as Missing Persons Day and support the goals and ideals of the day. And that we acknowledge the names and the families of the Coloradans who are currently missing. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to Voices of Victims, Families of Homicide Victims and Missing Persons Incorporated, Colorado Victims for Justice, the Colorado Organization for Victim Assistance, and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation.
Senator Fields.
Thank you. Members, please be seated. To the families that are here today, I do want to reiterate that you are not alone, that this body and this chamber cares about your missing child, father, sister, cousin, friend, family member, whoever is missing. You are not alone. And this chambers and others around the nation have implemented systems to help alert others to find people that's missing, like the Amber Alert system. So when we see someone that's missing or someone that's been abducted, we have system in place that alerts other people in our community to help look for that person. Those systems are working, and they're bringing members, your loved ones, back home to them. You are not alone. I can't imagine the pain that must be associated with having someone you love not there for Christmas or for holidays or for their birthdays, not knowing where they are, if they're safe, if they're still with us. Please know that you are not alone. We had an incident in Aurora not too long ago where a little boy, 9 years old, was missing. He was later found in a frozen pond. But the Amber Alert system did not work for him because he was not abducted, so they did not issue the Amber Alert until 2 days later. And in my view, that was too late. Anytime a child is missing, especially at 9 years old, that is a high sense of urgency, and we should be looking for that child. Every time you come down here, and I've been down here for 6 years, this is my first time in the Senate, when you bring pictures of your loved ones, it really touches my heart and it shakes my soul because you have not forgotten your loved one. And I can tell you, we here in this chambers will never forget as well. God bless you, and know that you're not alone.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President, and it's an honor today to carry this resolution with my good friend and colleague from Aurora, who has carried bills with regard to these with me, together with issues with missing persons and how we deal with some of the issues that we're dealing with. And I can tell you we are joined together here today in collective solidarity to acknowledge what the late President Ronald Reagan characterized as the stark terror of a unique tragedy. The members of the Colorado General Assembly, we recognize that this epidemic of missing persons in America is truly the silent mass disaster, and empathize with the ongoing suffering of the families and friends of those who remain missing. You know, it's important that we reiterate the facts so you understand the numbers. Today, as we gather to speak for the voiceless, every 40 seconds, an individual goes missing in America. Approximately 2,300 Americans are reported missing every day, and there are as many as 90,000 active missing person cases in our country at any given time. The figures are daunting, and consequently, our response must be equally combative. It is also critical to acknowledge the multitude of ages, the variety of extenuating circumstances of the missing persons we grieve for here today. Children and adults go missing from their families for a number of devastating reasons. They go under circumstances indicating that there may be physical damage or danger or victims of foul play, and they don't always recognize that. However, in each one of these cases, the commonality is the pain that is left behind as loved ones are left with few answers, if any at all. Families are torn apart as they cope with the void of a missing child. A child left without a mother or a father or a grandfather or a grandmother. I can tell you the state of Colorado is committed, and we are committed, to the safety and well-being of each of its citizens, no matter their age. We gather here today on this Missing Persons Day in Colorado to firmly underscore the importance of missing persons and their families and friends. We solemnly ask that the loved ones of the missing persons know that they are not alone in this tragedy of uncertainty and take comfort in the community present here today. Members, I ask for your support not only of this resolution, but of those families with missing people. Mr. President, I renew my motion.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Carpenter, would you please add Senator Tate and myself to the roll? Motion before the body. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. We request a roll call vote and the ringing of the chimes.
Request for a roll call vote has been made, and the chimes will ring out. Mr. Carpenter, would you please call the roll of the senators?
Senators Aguilar. Aguilar, aye. Senators Baumgardner. Baumgardner, aye. Senator Cook. Cook, aye. Senator Quorum. Quorum, aye. Senator Court. Court, aye. Senator Crowder. Crowder, aye. Senator Donovan. Donovan, aye. Senator Finberg. Finberg, aye. Senator Fields. Fields, aye. Senator Garcia. Garcia, aye. Senator Gardner. Gardner, aye. Senator Guzman. Guzman, aye. Senator Hill. Hill, aye. Senator Holbert. Holbert, aye. Senator John. John, aye. Senator Jones. Jones, aye. Senator Kagan. Kagan, aye. Senator Kafalis. Kafalis, aye. Senator Kerr. Kerr, aye. Senator Lambert. Lambert, aye. Senator Lumberg. Lumberg, aye. Senator Marble. Marble, aye. Senator Martinez-Humenick. Martinez-Humenick, aye. Senator Merrifield. Merrifield, aye. Senator Moreno. Moreno, aye. Senator Neville. Neville, aye. Senator Priola. Priola, aye. Senator Scott. Scott, aye. Senator Smallwood. Smallwood, aye. Senator Sonnenberg. Sonnenberg, aye. Senator Tate. Tate, aye. Senator Todd. Todd, aye. Senator Williams. Williams, aye. Senator Zinzinger. Zinzinger, aye. Mr. President.
Aye.
Mr. President, aye.
With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Joint Resolution 10 is adopted. Senator Fields.
Mr. President, I ask that the current roll call be used as co-sponsors.
If there is no objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, you can be seated again. I ask for a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Members throughout the chamber and in the gallery, we have families that are missing part of their family today. I'm not going to introduce all of them, but what I am going to do is ask each and every one the families in the room to stand up. Most of them have pictures or posters in the chamber. And if we could welcome you, if you'd please stand up with your pictures and let us welcome you to the chamber. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Carpenter, would you please read the title of the Senate Joint Resolution 11?
Senate Joint Resolution 11 by Senators Donovan and Martinez-Huminick and Representatives Hooton and Beckman concerning awareness of heart disease and in connection therewith declaring February 3rd, 2017 as National Wear Red Day.
Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 11 and respectfully ask that it be read at length.
Mr. Carpenter.
Senate Joint Resolution 11 by Senators Donovan and Martinez-Huminick and Representatives Hooton and Beckman concerning awareness of heart disease and in connection therewith declaring February 3rd, 2017 as National Wear Red Day. Whereas cardiovascular disease kills 1 in 3 women in the United States, yet 80% of cardiovascular diseases are preventable. And whereas every 80 seconds in the United States, a woman dies from a cardiovascular disease or stroke. And whereas an estimated 44 million women in the United States are affected by cardiovascular diseases. And whereas 90% of women have 1 or more factors for developing heart disease or stroke. And whereas women are less likely to call 911 for themselves when experiencing symptoms of a heart attack than they are if someone else were having a heart attack. And whereas only 36% of African American women and 34% of Hispanic women know that heart disease is their greatest health risk compared to 65% of Caucasian women. And whereas the American Heart Association's Go Red for Women movement motivates women to learn their family history and to meet with a health care provider to determine their risk for cardiovascular disease and stroke. And whereas Go Red for Women encourages women to take control of their heart health by knowing and managing these 5 numbers. 1, total cholesterol. 2, HDL, good cholesterol. 3, blood pressure. 4, blood sugar. And 5, body mass index. And whereas women involved with the Go Red for Women movement live healthier lives, now therefore be it resolved by the Senate of the 71st General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that we, the General Assembly, in recognition of the importance of the ongoing fight against heart disease and stroke, proclaim Friday, February 3rd, 2017, to be National Wear Red Day. Urge all citizens to wear the color red to commemorate the day and show their support for women in the fight against cardiovascular diseases, and recognize that by increasing awareness, speaking out about heart disease, and empowering women to reduce their risk for cardiovascular diseases, we can save thousands of lives each year. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to the Denver and Colorado Springs chapters of the American Heart Association.
Senator Martinez-Huminick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, probably everyone in this room knows someone who has had a heart attack. And this is really to bring awareness to the fact that although we do have both men and women that have experienced heart attacks, women very oftentimes don't even realize what the symptoms are, nor do their doctors. And Hispanic women are likely to develop heart disease 10 years earlier than Caucasian women. Of African American women ages 20 years and older, 48.3% have cardiovascular disease, yet only 14% believe that cardiovascular disease is their greatest health problem. Only about 50% of African American women are aware of the signs and symptoms of heart attack. And the symptoms of a heart attack can be very, very different in women than men. And women are always, or almost always, very, very busy, not only taking care of their families, but oftentimes working and volunteering their time. So when they experience a symptom that they really should be going to their doctors for, very oftentimes it's overlooked. When you get involved for supporting Go Red for Women by advocating and sharing your story, providing education to our young women and our young men about heart attacks, we can save lives. So I wanted to just make sure that everybody realizes that this is a very, very critical issue and that many women die. An estimated of 44 million die and or affected by cardiovascular disease in the United States. So I want to thank all of you who wore red today, and thank you for supporting this joint resolution.
Senator Corum.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you both for bringing this. It's, you never know when it's going to affect you. 2 years ago, we were moving in to the apartment. My wife had had a lung infection. She just kind of crashed. She'd gone to the doctor. Actually, she went to urgent care because her doctor had died. Another doctor would not take her. She couldn't find a doctor. She received a medication she had a reaction to. We got her to the hospital. Her blood pressure was 190 over 150. She had 19 pounds of water in her chest cavity. We thought we were going to lose her. Tough cowboy here. But with good help, I want to thank the governor. The governor assisted me in getting a doctor at university. She's been under doctor's care for 2 years. It was announced about this time last year that she was originally diagnosed with congestive heart failure. Not a lot of hope. Good medication, good doctor. They announced that her heart had healed itself, which is amazing. A lot of people thought it was great medication, a lot of prayers, which we had both. I personally thought it was the Lord didn't want her and the devil was afraid of her. But it's something that affects you each and every day, and I want to thank you for this time. Thank you.
Senator Court.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to say that I told Senator Corum at the time that Diana's heart healed itself because it's such a good heart. She's a wonderful person, as is my sweetheart, Senator Corum.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the good senator for sharing that story. That's exactly what this resolution aims to do, is share our personal stories to increase our knowledge about this issue. With that, I renew our motion for the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 11.
If there is no further discussion, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Joint Resolution 11. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Joint Resolution 11 is adopted. Co-sponsors, Senator Martinez-Humenick.
Thank you, Mr. President. We would ask that the current roll call be added to the resolution.
If there is no objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors. Colleagues, we have many guests in the chamber today that are here for this resolution. We will stand in a recess so that we may greet our guests.
Okay.
Senate will come back to order. Third reading of bills. Let's see. Mr. Carpenter, would you please read the title to Senate Bill 17?
Senate Bill 17 by Senator Aguilar and Representative Singer concerning adding stress disorders to the list of debilitating medical conditions for the purposes of the use of medical marijuana.
Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I move Senate Bill 17 on third reading and final passage. This bill came out of the interim committee on the cost benefits of marijuana. It passed the committee unanimously, and it also passed the Legislative Council committee unanimously. Medical marijuana is now legal in 38 states and the District of Columbia, although 10 only allow oils. PTSD is on the list of qualifying conditions for medical marijuana in 17 of these 28 states and the District of Columbia, and with the passage of this bill, Colorado will be added to that list. It is always difficult for me when we have bills in the legislature that deal with medical topics. In general, I feel like it is up to the Colorado Medical Board to determine what the medical standard of care is, particularly since it's very fluid. With that in mind, I do my best to try to keep specifics about the medical standard of care out of Colorado statutes. We could spend hours, nay days, talking about marijuana in Colorado. Like many of my physician colleagues, I am dismayed by the number of young adults who got med cards for pain and spasm after Obama's 2008 decision not to prosecute those who use medical marijuana in compliance with state laws. But that's a different discussion. And I share providers' concerns about the risk of long-term neurological damage to the developing brain of those under 21. But we also know that 22 veterans per day commit suicide related to PTSD. And we heard in committee that many veterans have been using medical marijuana for PTSD with good results and a return to normal function. We also heard compelling testimony from domestic violence victims in committee. Since serving in the legislature, I've had the opportunity to meet patients whose lives have been improved by medical marijuana. Like most physicians, I regret that we have not had the opportunity to do more research in this area, and I'm grateful that our Department of Public Health and Environment has funded some studies. We have funded at least one study on this topic by Dr. Sue Sicily. She states that the results won't be available until 2019 at best. She is in support of Colorado adding PTSD as a medical condition at this time. In my opinion, Senate Bill 17 gives doctors the option to recommend medical marijuana for PTSD. We as legislators are not saying they should. We are just letting this diagnosis be listed on med cards. The benefits to the patients are that they can now be honest with their provider about what they are using and why. Hopefully this will help build trust. It also allows providers to follow patients for the outcome with the therapy. It is a significant tax reduction for the patient, and the VA has stated that it will not sanction veterans who use medical marijuana in conformity with state law, so this will allow our veterans to come out of the closet. At the end of the day, it is still the responsibility of the recommending doctor to use medical marijuana judiciously and to follow the patient closely for response. If there are providers whose recommendation behaviors are in question, I would encourage inquiries be sent to our medical board for appropriate clinical review. In fact, it is the duty of physicians under our Medical Practice Act to report to the board any licensee who they believe is violating the standard of medical care. And so we as a legislator with Senate Bill 17 are going to step out of the way and let the medical providers decide whether and when a patient should receive medical marijuana for PTSD and acute stress disorder. And so I urge your support for Senate Bill 17.
Senator Martinez-Humanic.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I ask that this be pulled off at the consent calendar simply because medical marijuana and retail marijuana are highly contested topics regarding some of our constituents. Some are for it, some are against it. And I felt that it needed to be explained here on the floor to make sure we had a clear-cut understanding so that we can go back and talk to our constituents when they do have concerns.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 17 on third reading. Are there any no votes? With the vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, please add Senator Lambert as a no vote. Are there any further no votes? With the vote of 34 ayes, 1 no, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 17 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Senator Guzman, Senator Kafalas, Senator Marble, Senator Sonnenberg, Senator Kagan, Senator Williams, Senator Moreno, Senator Donovan, Senator Todd, Senator Fenberg, Senator Merrifield, Senator John, Majority Leader Holbert, Senator Neville, Senator Lundberg, Senator Coram, Senator Priola, Senator Crowder, Senator Garcia, Senator Kerr, Senator Jones, General Order, second reading of bills, consent calendar. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we now resolve ourselves in the committee of the whole for the purpose of general orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar.
Motion before the body is to resolve itself into the committee of the whole for consideration of general orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The motion is adopted and the Senate will resolve itself into the committee of the whole for the consideration of the general orders, second reading of bills, consent calendar, and Senator Sonnenberg will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. Please read the title to the one bill on the consent calendar.
Senate Bill 14 by Senator Baumgardner and Representatives Quorum and Becker J. Concerning a prohibition against the imposition of inspection requirements for underground petroleum storage tanks for the charging of inspection fees for the inspection of underground petroleum storage tanks by the local government.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 14 on second reading consent calendar. Ask for an aye vote.
Is there any discussion on the one bill on the consent calendar? Seeing none, the motion for the body is the adoption of the bills on the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Consent calendar is adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
Question before us is the committee rising and reporting. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Committee will rise and report.
Senate will come to order. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee has had one bill under consideration on the consent calendar. Mr. Carpenter, would you please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs lead report is added on consideration of the following attached bills being the second reading thereof and makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 14 passed on second reading, order engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Move for the adoption of the report, Mr. President. Thank you.
The motion before the body is the adoption of the committee of the whole report. Are there any no votes? Seeing none, with a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, the committee of the whole report is adopted. General order, second reading of bill's calendar. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the committee now resolve itself for the purpose of, or to the committee of the whole for the purpose of general order, second reading of bills.
Motion before the body is to resolve itself in the committee of the whole for consideration of the general order, second reading of bill's calendar. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The motion is adopted, and the Senate will resolve itself in the committee of the whole for consideration of general order, second reading of bill's calendar, and Senator Sonnenberg will take the chair.
Committee will come to order. Court rule is relaxed. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title of Senate Bill 65.
Senate Bill 65 by Senator Lundberg concerning a requirement that healthcare providers disclose the charges they impose for common healthcare services when payment is made directly rather than by a third party.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Senate Bill 65 and the Senate Health and Human Services Committee report. I think I'm in order.
Any discussion on the Health and Human Services Committee report? Question before us then is the adoption of the Health and Human Services Committee report. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L003.
Amendment L003 to Senate Bill 65 by Senator Aguilar, amend printed bill page.
Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move Amendment L003, but I probably should have waited and let the bill sponsor talk about the bill first. So is it okay if we wait until he's had the opportunity to discuss the bill?
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can do this within the context of the amendment because the amendment is meant to amend a bill that has to do with providing more transparency for medical services here in the state of Colorado, and it is a bill that we've actually seen in years past and have done some work on, but maybe this is the year we've found the magic mix. It is intended to be a start in providing more information to people when they go to a hospital or when they go into a doctor's office as to what do the main charges cost? What is this facility really costing? And I don't expect that this bill will answer all the questions, but I hope it gets everybody, both providers and patients, in the habit of just asking the basic question, what does this cost? Especially with today's medical insurance systems where you're paying the first several $1,000s anyway. Unfortunately, far too often people only pay attention to it after the fact. Well, this gives them that information early on, and as I say, hopefully this will change the conversation so that we become more cost conscious when it's appropriate and you're able, and I believe that will provide a good competitive environment for medical costs, and maybe we can see some corrections in the right direction. So this amendment that is before us today is a little bit of a refinement to that, and I'll certainly leave that up to the sponsor of the amendment to go further, especially if she moves the amendment.
Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members, for your forbearance. I move Amendment L003 to Senate Bill 65. Amendment L003 actually adds a statement to the prices, informing consumers that if they are covered by health insurance, they're actually encouraged to consult with their insurer to determine accurate information about their financial responsibility. Senator Lundberg was correct in stating this bill is a start. And in fact, even today, if you look, you can find on the internet some hospital prices. But what you will find is what's commonly referred to as hospital charges. And unfortunately, few people actually have to pay hospital charges. Almost every person, everybody who has insurance will be given a price that their insurer has negotiated. And sadly, every insurer negotiates a different price, and even within the plans they cover, they have different prices. And so this just marks for people to know that if you have insurance, this price is likely not the price that applies to you, and you will be given a different price based on your insurance, and you could ask your insurer what that price is. It also reminds people that if they don't have insurance, that they should contact the billing office of the provider to find out what price they might be given for paying in cash up front, because frequently providers will give a significant discount to people who pay up front and in cash for their services. So I'd ask for your support for Amendment L003.
Seeing no further discussion, I'm sorry, Senator Lundberg.
Only to say thank you, Mr. Chair, that I consider this a friendly amendment.
Seeing no further discussion on Amendment L003, all those in favor of the adoption of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Amendment L003 is adopted. There is another amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read L004.
Amendment L004 to Senate Bill 65.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an amendment that I'm bringing forward. I move L004.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really very simple, straightforward amendment that's intended to clarify when an employer is considered a third-party payer and when they are not. It doesn't change the substance nor the meaning of the bill at all, but there was some question in committee as to just how employers are defined on pages 3 and 4 of the bill, and this simply adds the term that where services that, well, anyway, that's what it does.
Any other discussion on Amendment L004? Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this was a confusing textual thing, and we're just trying to make sure that the law is clear, and I'd ask for your support.
Seeing no further discussion on L004, all those in favor of adoption of Amendment L004 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. L004 is adopted. To the bill. Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I renew my motion for the adoption of Senate Bill 65. I believe it's a proper policy for the people of Colorado that will hopefully add more transparency and a better pricing structure for medical processes here in Colorado.
Senator Kafalis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, colleagues. I heard the bill in Health and Human Services Committee, Senate Bill 65. It passed unanimously 5-0, and I rise in support of this bill. I just want to share a statement. Having access to price information for health care services before seeking medical treatment can help consumers lower their out-of-pocket costs and responsibly budget for their future health care needs. And I think that statement alone suggests or reinforces the importance of moving the dial forward in terms of greater transparency with health care costs. I encourage your support of this bill.
Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, you might kind of recognize this bill from a couple of years ago. You passed it through this chamber unanimously, and of course, my good friend from Weld County, or excuse me, from Larimer County, being on this bill now, it's a good bill, and it's time that comes. We need to have some transparency. We need to develop a marketplace in medicine once again. So I urge an aye vote.
Senator Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, as you see, my name is also on this bill as a co-sponsor. I wanted to just add a couple of comments. I thank Senator Lundberg for bringing this bill forward, and I agree with him that it's a step. I think that there are many people who would have liked us to see asking hospitals to disclose facility fees on there, particularly with respect to emergency room coverage. But Senator Lundberg, being a realist, wants us to get something through this year and hopefully, if it works, build on it. But I want to remind people that price is not the only thing you should consider in medical care. Quality is also important to consider, and there are websites that give you information about the quality of the different hospitals and the outcomes they have in different procedures. So if you are in the position of shopping for your medical care, please also look for quality. Unfortunately, only 30% of medical care is care that we can shop for in advance. 70% of our costs are unexpected things when you end up in an emergency room or needing an unanticipated surgery. And so we will work further to find ways in which we can lower the prices and cost for those things. And finally, I want people who have insurance to know and realize that the price that you see listed is not the price you will necessarily have to pay. Your insurer has negotiated a discount for you, and it's always important that you find out if and what that discount is. And I thank you again, Senator Lundberg, for bringing forward this bill, and I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no, Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. Just want to reiterate, this is not meant to be an expensive or heavy-handed regulation. It is meant to meet the minimum standard that will initiate cost-conscious choice in medical care here in Colorado. I urge an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 65 as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 65 is adopted. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title. Mr. Carpenter, please read the title to Senate Bill 5.
Senate Bill 5 by Senator Holbert and Representative Neville concerning handgun safety training courses for school employees and in connection therewith permitting certain school employees to carry concealed handguns in public schools.
Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Senate Bill 5 in the committee report from State Veterans and Military Affairs.
To the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the committee, we did adopt, or the committee did adopt, an amendment that clarifies that employment file information, if a district employee is approved through the proposed training program, as is the case now, those matters are managed through the employee file and are not subject to CORA. Ask for an aye vote on the committee report.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is the adoption of the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Committee report is adopted. To the bill, there is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L007.
Amendment L007 is Senate Bill 5 by
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move L007.
Please proceed, Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. L007 embraces the Armed School Employee Insurability Standards. And members, you had a bound group of articles and handout materials. The first thing that you have in that package is the Armed School Employee Insurability Standards. And I ask you to please note that down in the lower right-hand corner that this comes to us from the Colorado School District's Self-Insurance Pool. So it's important to understand that members of the self-insurance pool, I'm told that there are 21 districts and charters that are already arming district staff, school staff, not under Senate Bill 5, but under current law. And the self-insurance pool, if you look at page 2, you can see their requirements for district personnel, people who work at schools, to get their initial training to enter into this program. And then the second paragraph, I believe, outlines the training that is required upon renewal. Another piece that you have in your handout packet is an editorial from the Denver Post where they refer to Senate Bill 5 as an imperfect bill to train school staff to use concealed weapons. And if you take time to read the Denver Post editorial, you'll find that they recognize that schools and districts are already doing this. and they suggest that we adopt minimum standards. Since the school districts already have these minimum standards, Amendment 7 puts into the bill these minimum standards. Now you might say, well, the words don't look the same. You might recall from prior experience that we can't put, for instance, the name Colorado School District Self-Insurance Pool in statute. We couldn't put a brand name in statute, but if you look at the text of Amendment 7, you will find that it mirrors those conditions on page 2, which are, again, the minimum training requirements for approval, initial approval, and then for renewal of the permission to be armed on school campus through this proposed training program. That's what L007 does. It establishes such minimum criteria and asks for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is the adoption of L007. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. L007 is adopted. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L008.
Amendment L008, Senate Bill 5 by Senator Holbert.
Mr. Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move L008.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. L008 is an amendment that came requested by the Charter League, and I believe my good friend from El Paso County, one of the senators from El Paso County, has done work with charters. This clarifies that charter schools that might currently allow staff to be armed, and if Senate Bill 5 becomes law, could then currently make the decisions that a school board can make in current law or under the proposed Senate Bill 5. What that means is that the board of the charter school could say, yes, we want to participate. No, we don't want to participate. How many people in that school could participate? Because the bill allows the school board, or with this amendment clarifying, my intent was to allow the charter board to say yes, no, how many, and then also to be able to manage those conditions through an employment file. Remember that teachers and staff undergo rather stringent background checks when they're hired, and we have current law that requires certain charges, certain criminal activity, things that happen to people who work in school districts to be reported into their employing school or district. We already have that, so L008 clarifies the authority of the charter board to be able to manage those things and make their decisions for their charter school. I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to ask for a quick senatorial 5. This is about a page-long amendment, and I see that it's just changing a few words here and there, but it's a little bit complicated, so just asking for a senatorial 5 that we can kind of go over this a little bit.
We will stand in recess for senatorial 5. Committee will come back to order. Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I renew my motion for an aye vote on L008.
Seeing no further discussion on L008, the question before us is the adoption of amendment L008. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. L008 is adopted. Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Getting to Senate Bill 5, my son, my older son, who turned 22 yesterday, spent 21 weeks this past year going through post-certification as part of the Douglas County Sheriff's Department Academy for sheriff deputies. The sheriff in Douglas County provides training for Park County, Arapahoe County, I believe the city of Sheridan, and the city of Inglewood. That facility that we have in Douglas County may provide post-certification training for other jurisdictions, but in my son's graduating class, those 5 were present. In talking with my son and understanding the training that he went through last year, there were a lot of things in post-certification that I came to understand, in my opinion, probably aren't necessary for people who carried concealed and those who might carry on our school campuses. I started to ask the question, how much training should be required even before my son went through post-certification training? I asked that question first a couple of years ago when there was a bill when I was still in the House that sought to grant permanent lifetime authority for post-certified law enforcement officers after they are retired so that they can carry concealed and serve potentially as security guards in schools or other applications. I asked a retired police officer where I might go to get post-certified. And the answer was civilians, people outside of law enforcement can't do that. And that's really where this idea began. But I went to the drafting office last fall and asked for, or actually I think it was midsummer, and asked for this bill to be drafted because I want to ask the question, I am asking the question, how much training should be required of people who are armed in our schools? So who can be armed in our schools today? Current law, if you look at Title 18, 1812-105 and 1812-214, you'll find descriptions of a statewide prohibition of firearms on our public K-12 campuses. A statewide prohibition. And then there are exemptions to that prohibition. The first exemption that I think most people agree with is that post-certified law enforcement, sheriff deputies, police officers, the sheriff, the police chief, they can be armed on our school campuses. And if you read Title 18 and also Title 22, you'll find that the emergency response plans for schools and districts refer to something called a school resource officer, or SRO. In order to be an SRO armed on campus, one must be post-certified law enforcement, a sheriff deputy, a police officer. Then there's another exemption for security guards. Well, what's the definition of security guard? There really isn't one. Anyone. It could be you, me, the bus driver, the football coach, an administrator, or yes, a teacher. Right now in current law. In working on this bill, I've come to understand that there are 21 districts or charters. If you go back to that self-insurance pool document, there's 21 members of this self-insurance pool, school districts or charters, where district personnel are currently armed. This bill doesn't propose that they be allowed to be armed. That's already law. And most of the testimony against Senate Bill 5 in committee, in my opinion, was against current law, against those 2 exemptions. I understand that some people say we don't want any guns in school, but that's not Senate Bill 5. That's an argument against current law, Title 18, Section 12. So what does Senate Bill 5 propose to do? Well, again, my intention was to ask the question, how much training should be required? So I think a good place for us to start in looking at Senate Bill 5 is to ask, how much training is required now to be a security guard in a school? None. And if you're opposed to Senate Bill 5, I would ask you to please consider that being opposed to this bill upholds the none standard. Is that what you want? Maybe so. And maybe there are arguments against the bill that could explain that it isn't upholding none as the training standard, but that's what it is now. In law, there is no requirement for training for a so-called security guard. If you read the news, if you watch television, if you're able to get Channel 13 out of El Paso County, they came up and interviewed me, and I didn't know this was going to be their spin on the story, but their story was that Senate Bill 5 is emulating what they're doing in the Hanover School District. What are they doing? They're arming school personnel, and they're putting them through this training program that was designed and put together by the self-insurance pool, and I believe the Hanover District is part of this self-insurance pool. I wasn't offended by that, but I didn't understand that was going to be their headline, that I'm emulating what they're already doing. But that's true. This bill proposes training for people who are already armed or people who want to be armed. So does this bill, if this bill becomes law, does it mean that anyone who works for a school district who wants to be armed could be armed? No, it doesn't mean that. A school district board, there are 178 of them, and if you refer back to the state constitution, I understand that Colorado was one of the 6 states in the nation that identifies local control of curriculum, the management, the authority over our school districts. We're one of 6 states that defines that in our state constitution, and I believe it's been that way since 1876. So under current law, the Hanover School District or any of the 178 school districts, that elected board of directors, the school board, 5 or 7 people elected out of that community, they can decide right now they don't want anyone armed in their schools, including school resource officers, law enforcement. Now, I don't think they would have the authority to say that law enforcement couldn't come on campus if there was an emergency, but I do believe they have the authority to say they don't want school resource officers. And we also have to recognize that the state constitution, dating back to 1876, it respected something that makes us strong as a state, our diversity. The rural districts where there are no police officers, there isn't a police department. So I live in unincorporated Douglas County, and there isn't a police department. Now, just a couple feet off of my property line, you'd be in Lone Tree, and there is a police department. If you go to Parker inside the city limits, there's a police department. Castle Rock. If you go to Highlands Ranch, that isn't a municipality and there is no police department. But if you go out to Sterling, where my good friend, the chair, serves as senator, 25% of the 178 school districts are in Senate District 1. 25% of those. Some of those school districts in rural Colorado are 15, 30, 45, maybe 60 minutes from the nearest deputy. That's not how it works here in Denver. That's not how it works in Jefferson County, and that's certainly not the way it works in Douglas County, where we have urban, suburban, and rural kind of all merging together. If you call 911 in Douglas County, you might have Parker Police, you might have Castle Rock Police, you may have Lone Tree Police show up, but chances are you're going to have a Douglas County deputy show up at your door, and they're going to be there in minutes. So what happens in Douglas County if there's a forest fire? The sheriff is in charge, not the fire marshal, the sheriff. What happens if there's an emergency, a shooting, something catastrophic at a school in Douglas County? Guess who is in charge? The sheriff. If you read Title 22, if you've been on an education committee, you would know that schools and districts are required to have emergency response plans. And yes, if we go back to that terrible day at Columbine, a lot of that emergency response was in response to that. We require in statute that our schools and our school districts have emergency response plans, that they have it figured out what they're going to do if something bad happens. Guess who they work with? Law enforcement. In Douglas County, they work with the Douglas County Sheriff. So to come back to Senate Bill 5, my question is, how much training should be required for those personnel, specifically those so-called security officers, security guards, who again can be the bus driver, the football coach? I understand from the districts that right now they're not arming any teachers. That was enlightening to know. The people in those 21 member districts or charters of the self-insurance pool, plus they say about 5 who are not members of that pool. So right now we have in Colorado somewhere in the range of 25, maybe 26 school districts or charter schools where school personnel are armed. But I'm told that as far as the self-insurance pool can tell, they're administrators, not teachers. Okay, they have that choice under current law, and if Senate Bill 5 becomes law, they would have the same choice. That doesn't change. What I'm proposing in Senate Bill 5 is that our 64 county sheriffs not be granted the authority to put together a training program, because they could already do that. Senate Bill 5 proposes that if a sheriff puts together, again with now the minimum criteria set forth in the school district self-insurance pool that already exists, if a sheriff designs a program and uses this as the minimum criteria and works with his or her school board to determine what other criteria do they want, and if a sheriff puts together a training program, then the school board could look at that program and say, we like it. We want our employees to go through that training. Or the school board could say, we don't like it. We don't want guns in our schools. They can say that now, and if Senate Bill 5 becomes law, the school board could say it then. And the same applies with L008 to the board of a charter school. So long as that district says yes, the charter schools can say yes, or an institute charter school that could operate outside of the wishes of that school district, that school board, because they're operating under CSI. So a school board would be able to say yes or no to a program designed by their county sheriff. There's 64 sheriffs and 178 school districts. The school districts can make this decision now, and if Senate Bill 5 becomes law, they could make the decision then. Except all of a sudden with Senate Bill 5, they would have county sheriffs saying, how much training should be required? Which is exactly the question I'm asking with the bill. I think our county sheriffs that provide post-certification training right now are uniquely qualified to answer that question. A question was raised in committee. Well, would we have another background check required? I talked to my sheriff, Tony Spurlock in Douglas County, and he wasn't really sure why we would have another background check, because he's already working with our school district and aware that in order to work for the school district, the person goes through extensive background checks. And if they get in trouble, some legal trouble, that's reported into the school district. And a school district, obviously, I mean, I can't imagine why a school district, a principal, a school board would say, gosh, this person has run into legal trouble and there's question. I think their employment with the school district is, or the charter school is more at risk than someone in authority saying, yes, be armed on our school campus. If someone who is armed currently or under Senate Bill 5 runs into legal trouble, that would trigger back into their employment file, and I'm confident that the school board or the district could say, you know what, you're armed on our school campus, but we've become aware of this legal issue, we're going to withdraw that. And they can do that now, and if Senate Bill 5 becomes law, they could do it then. So does a school board, if Senate Bill 5 becomes law, would a school board be required to use that sheriff's program? No. That school board, any of the 178 school boards, could look at 1, 2, 10, or potentially 64 different types of programs, all with the minimum requirements of the existing school district self-insurance pool training curriculum. If a school board or a charter board says, no, we don't want this, that ends the conversation. No employee could go around them. No employee would be required or pressured to carry a firearm. This would be people saying, yes, I want to do this. And one of the fascinating things that I've heard from people who are for or against, I thought that maybe it would be balanced or maybe more men were asking for this. But reality, if you talk to people who represent the districts, in reality, there's more women asking for this. Can I show you quantifiable data? No. I can just invite you to talk with the people out in the lobby. Talk with the representatives of the Colorado Association of School Boards. Talk with the representatives of the Colorado Association of School Executives. Talk with the representatives of the self-insurance pool. Talk with the Charter League. Talk with CSI. Talk with people who actually deal with district employees who can relate those stories. That's where I've heard that anecdotal evidence that women are actually asking for this in greater numbers than men. I also ask you to take into consideration, I mentioned earlier that in my opinion that opposing Senate Bill 5, I really encourage you to recognize that in my opinion you're upholding no or at least low training standards, no requirements. That's all up to the discretion of the school board or the charter board now. But if you find it reasonable that we ask the question how much training should be required, then ask yourself, if there's a person out there who is seeking to be armed and something bad happens, would you rather that they be more familiar with the sheriff and the emergency response plan for that classroom, that school, that district? Would you like them to be more familiar with how law enforcement is going to respond from outside the walls or maybe inside the walls of that school? Would you like those people to be more familiar with that or less? I can't understand why anyone in the realm of education would be opposed to education, training, information. That's what Senate Bill 5 proposes to do. So the school board can shop among the sheriffs. If their sheriff doesn't have a program or the program that the school board looking for isn't adequate, they can go to any other sheriff and say, we want that one, or we want those 2, or these 5 or 10. I think it's also important to consider the new opportunity. I think I was accused in social media and maybe in the Denver Post of trying to skip over this part. No. Charles Ashby is not here, but the Grand Junction Sentinel, he actually quoted me from committee pointing to this new exemption to the prohibition. Right now, the exemption that allows school district employees is that the school district or the charter board hire that employee as a security guard. If Senate Bill 5 becomes law, there would be a new exemption to the prohibition, and that would be for district or charter school employees who complete the training program, go through the initial program, and then comply with the renewal requirements that we just put into this bill with the amendment. Those employees would have a new exemption to the prohibition. They have been granted that exemption because they've completed the training program. They wouldn't have to be hired as a security guard, but they still could be. I appreciate Mr. Ashby quoting me because some have suggested that I tried to glaze over that in committee. No, that would be a new exemption. Again, does that mean that anyone could be armed? No. No, it doesn't mean that any person in a school or a district could be armed. Only those who would be approved by the school board or the charter school would be armed, could be armed, just like it currently works, just like current statute. That's not new. The new condition would be they wouldn't have to be hired as a security guard and compensated for that, but they still could be. Then there was a suggestion that, well, there's no requirement that security guards go through this training. Members, the training is based on what they're doing now voluntarily. Would you like to keep that voluntary, or would you like to put in statute that sheriffs are enabled, empowered, encouraged to offer training that's at least this and probably more? It was suggested that CASB and CASE were opposed. In something I read, a letter to the editor of the Denver Post. No, go ask. They haven't voted to take a position of support, but both of those organizations right now, as the last I asked, are neutral. They haven't voted to take a position on Senate Bill 5. Why? Well, because both organizations, I'm sure, I can't speak for them, but it makes sense, doesn't it, that they recognize that some 25 districts and charter organizations are already doing this. Why would they vote to condemn what their members are already doing under current law? I'm grateful to those in the community. I just spoke with a representative of the Denver Public School system, and DPS, their security folks are looking at the bill, and again, the message out there in the lobby was not, we're opposed or they're opposed. It was, we're looking at the bill and we want to make sure that this works with what we're already doing and what they would be able to do if Senate Bill 5 becomes law. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your patience as I walk through Senate Bill 5. Thank you, members. Thank you to folks out there in Colorado who have paid attention to this bill. For or against, thank you for your advocacy. But Senate Bill 5 asks a very simple question: how much training should be required? And I ask your support for let's increase that, let's set a threshold, let's get district employees who want to be armed working with their school boards, who agree with that perspective, and working with their sheriffs to better train those people who are there to protect themselves, our kids, my son out in Douglas County. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't disagree with the majority leader very much on this one. I agree that trying to further define the training that is required or get some training required of people who are already in our schools with guns is a good thing. I agree that this is something that should be looked at. It should be discussed. Like many of the groups he mentioned, the Colorado Association of School Executives, Colorado Association for School Boards, absolutely, they should be at the table helping to discuss, helping to define exactly what we're trying to do here. Now, I might differ a little bit with my friend from Douglas County. I am one of those people who want as few guns in school as possible. I do want the few people who are in our schools that are armed, a sheriff, a police chief, a deputy, school resource officer, that we know have extensive training in this. And I want to make sure that that happens with everyone who under our Constitution, under our statutes, is allowed into a school carrying a gun. And we have been invited to go out into the lobby and ask various lobbyists of some of these groups and other groups what their opinions on this bill are. But I don't think that's sufficient. I think that this bill needs to be vetted by a group of legislators and some of the aforementioned groups. I think that this bill needs to have more input than it has received already. I think that this bill needs to be vetted by a group whose charge is to study issues related to school safety and the prevention of threats to the safety of students, teachers, administrators, employees, and volunteers who are present on the grounds of each public and private school in the state. A committee that studies and evaluates programs and methods for identifying and monitoring students in crisis. Legislators whose charge is to develop standardized criteria for school personnel to use in assessing the potential threat posed by one or more students. I think that this bill needs to be studied by a group of legislators who are looking at the duty of school districts and charter schools and their employees to exercise reasonable care to protect all students, faculty, and staff from harm resulting from acts committed by another person when the harm is reasonably foreseeable, while such students, faculty, and staff are within the school facilities or are participating in school-sponsored activities. A committee that will look at any statutory provisions that may require modification to reflect local community circumstances and standards, talking about local control. A committee that can make recommendations concerning steps that a school district or a charter school may take to satisfy its duty of reasonable care. A committee that may recommend legislative changes, such as Senate Bill 5, that shall be treated as legislation recommended by an interim committee for purposes of any introduction deadlines or bill limitations imposed by the joint rules of the General Assembly. If only we had such a committee. If only members of this body and that other body across the way, if only we had such a committee, and we actually do. Many of you voted for, if you were in this body or the other body 2 years ago, you voted to help create the School Safety and Youth in Crisis Committee, whose charge I've just read to you, and which committee absolutely, having been a member of that committee for the last 2 years, and having looked at many of these issues, and having people, the teachers, the parents, the students, the professionals who deal with this on a daily basis come in and testify before us and present information to us. This is the committee that should vet this bill first before we're asked to vote on it here. I was pleased to serve on that committee with President Cadman and the former Majority Leader Scheffel, and also Speaker Duran was on that committee as well. And being a member of that committee, I move that the Senate send Senate Bill 5 to the School Safety and Youth in Crisis Committee. Thank you.
Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ask for a no vote on the motion. Obviously, the School Safety Committee could look at current law. And again, what we're asking for in Senate Bill 5 is that districts could do exactly what they can do now with their sheriff using the criteria that is outlined in the self-insurance pool. So if this was something new, if we were talking about arming people on campus as a first step, then I might actually agree with the motion, but we're not. I see no purpose in having the School Safety Committee, task force, look at approving what school districts and charters are already doing. If that was the case, then we would have already done that last year. This condition, the school resource officer, the security personnel, this didn't get invented in statute last year. It's been there. And this motion effectively puts in jeopardy those 25 or 26 districts or charters that are already doing that. And I would not support a motion that would change the security response, the plans for those charters or districts that they already have in place. Let's not do anything that questions them. Let's respect that even the organizations that represent the school boards and the school executives, they're not putting at risk what charters and districts are already doing under current law. And I ask for a no vote on the motion for exactly the same reasons.
Question before us is the motion, Senator Kerr, to the current motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Why was this committee created in the first place? As I mentioned, not only did President Cadman and Majority Leader Scheffel sit on the committee, but this committee was their idea. This committee was created exactly to identify and discuss in an open forum these very issues. If we are not going to use a committee that was created exactly for a bill like this, and we don't know, maybe after being vetted by the committee, they will come out with the exact same bill that we have here. Or possibly that, having heard from our parents, our students, the professionals in the schools themselves, that they will find a few changes here and there that we can make that will make this bill an even better bill, a bill that we can all get behind, a bill that we can all stand together and say, yes, we, the Senate of Colorado, believe that this bill will make our schools safer, make sure that all of our students in our schools are safer. By passing this motion, this doesn't change anything that's already happening. If there is a district that is doing something right now, a school board that's doing something right now, a charter school that's doing something right now, by sending this bill to that committee, it doesn't slow them down. It doesn't change anything that they're doing right now. But what it will do is give those school boards, give those teachers, give those parents the opportunity to give input into this bill to make sure it is the best possible safety measure for our students in our schools that we can possibly do. I ask for an aye vote on the motion.
Senate will stand in recess. Committee will come back to order. The question before, Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I ask for a no vote on the motion.
The question before us is the motion to move Senate Bill 5 to the committee, the School Safety and Youth in Crisis Committee. Division has been called. All those not entitled to vote, please be seated. All those in favor of the amendment or the motion to move schools to the School Safety and Youth in Crisis Committee, please rise. Please be seated. All those in opposition to the motion, please rise. The motion is lost. Back to the bill. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Carpenter, please read Amendment L005.
Amendment L005 to Senate Bill 5 by Senator Finberg. Amend printed bill, page 3.
Senator Finberg.
Oh, it's got his name on it.
Someone else want to talk on the amendment? Senator Finberg's amendment. Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L005.
To the amendment, Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I was hoping that we could have a discussion with the School Safety and Youth in Crisis Committee, and I think we're almost there. We got really close within one vote, and so I think we're on to something here. And so instead of slowing down the process of the bill, here's an amendment where we can come together. We're still involving the committee, the School Safety and Youth in Crisis Committee. We're just making sure that that committee has been able to vet a training program that a sheriff may approve under the terms of this bill. So with that, I ask for your approval of L005.
Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the sponsor's intent, but for the same reasons that we voted down the prior motion, I'd ask for a no vote on L005. The elected county sheriffs are, in my opinion, are experts on school safety and safety in their communities. and they are empowered and elected by their communities to work with the school board in that community or another around the state. And those 5 or 7 people are also elected by the people, and they have the authority to make these decisions. Any decision that they would make that would be outside of statute, of course, would be illegal. And they can make these decisions now. That's not new. What we're looking at is, what we're asking in Senate Bill 5 is required and more training, not the establishment of concealed carry or open carry for people who are authorized to do that on school campus. So again, if there was a question of that now, I think that the committee, the Youth and School Safety and Youth and Crisis Committee, could have already looked at that. I see no reason to move or to pass this amendment and make what our county sheriffs and the school districts can do now and what they could do later if Senate Bill 5 becomes law. I see no reason to make that apply to current statute because it already does. Ask for a no vote.
Senator Court.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Many of you know that I teach and that I bring students with me to the Capitol. And this year I have a student who is a Marine from 9 years spent as a Marine. And he's listening to this discussion. And he thinks it's a good idea to be sure that the training is reviewed. He says, quote, "The amount of training in order to be prepared for an active shooter in a school, considering the possible targets, the dangers in the environment like children and civilians, and the situation of being alone in a gunfight would be more training than I think people realize. It's ongoing, intense, and life-altering. Shooting is a perishable skill. This is known among professional shooters." This is his opinion as a 9-year veteran of the Marines, and he thinks it would be a good idea for the school committee, the safety committee, to review all of the training programs. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out, currently, of the 64 counties, there's a vast array of differences of requirements that the sheriffs require for concealed carry. And therefore, the school safety committee should have and could have concerns on whether the sheriff of their particular county is providing adequate training for the teachers if they were to allow this to move forward. And that's a concern, I think, a legitimate concern, I think. Perhaps there is a reason to allow, that's a big perhaps, to allow teachers in that particular district to carry weapons or to have concealed carry in their classroom. But some sheriffs provide no training. They sign off on every single applications, and some are very stringent in requiring the maximum amount of training necessary before they allow that permit to be given. So I think it's a legitimate concern.
Any other discussion on L005? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the amendment L005. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. The noes have it. The amendment is lost. We're back to the bill. Any other discussion? Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. President Pro Tem. And
actually, it's Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry. Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Make no mistake, members, this bill does increase or would increase the flow of guns into K through 12 campuses. Under current law, you have to be a post-certified law enforcement officer or a security guard designated as such. This would enable a third category of person to bring a gun, concealed carry, onto the school campus. Now, we have thanks to the tremendous sacrifice made by the parents of the bereaved Claire Davis, may she rest in peace, who died in my Senate district 3 years ago, whose parents devoted the next couple of years of their lives to digging up information as to how that could happen and investigating in great depth and detail how such a tragedy could be avoided in the future. And they devoted their lives, and so many people in the school district devoted their time and effort, parents, teachers, to determining how can we make sure, or not make sure, but how can we encourage the fact that this not happen again. And they came up with very thoughtful recommendations. They said it's important to identify a troubled teenager. It's important to exchange information about that troubled teenager. It's important that once the troubled teenager has been identified, that the community gather round and support him or her, and let him or her know that as their anger is growing and their sense of alienation is growing and their sense of frustration is growing to maybe a dangerous point, that they do not stand alone. They have the support of the community in helping them find some measure of peace long before they get to the point where they take up arms and go and commit an atrocious act in one of our schools. The bereaved parents of Claire Davis have shown us the way, and that way is not to increase the flow of guns in the schools. Their investigations...
Senator Kagan, the bill is about training. Please address your comments to the bill, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The way is not to increase the number of people who can be trained and therefore qualified to carry guns into schools. The way forward is much more far-reaching than that. Please, honor the work that has been done on this. Please vote no on Senate Bill 005.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate this bill coming forward, 005. As the bill sponsor spoke earlier about rural Colorado schools, I did have that discussion with him. And what I was doing, I have 31 school districts in my area. And my main concern was going out to see these schools and see how their security was. You know, we have a lot of schools where you have people buzz you in and whatnot, and we've made considerable advances on that. But what was interesting in my travels, and I'm talking over a period of 3 or 4 years, I had a lot of ladies, teachers, come to me, and this was not something that I asked them. This is something that they offered to me, indicating that they would like the ability to have the permission to carry a gun. You know, their primary focus was safety of the kids and the amount of time it takes law enforcement to get to these areas. And I thought it was interesting that I had very few men teachers ask me, and I did not question that. I did not ask them, but it was interesting to see. And the way I perceived it, it was somewhat of a motherhood type situation where they were really concerned about the safety of the kids, and they wanted every available method in which to protect them. And so I think that the time has come on the training on this, and I think that and I cannot speak for metro area, but in rural Colorado, I think this is quite an advantage, and it will be carried out in a very good manner. But I do support this bill, and I think that we ought to look at, instead of arguing about, the hypothetical situation, we have to realize what has happened in our schools and the reality of this particular bill, how it can make a difference. And so I'm very adamant about being for this bill, and I would like you to consider just the safety of the children. Thank you.
Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, if you have Senate Bill 5 handy, I ask you to turn to page 5. And the prior speaker before last made the observation that this would somehow enable and allow more people to be armed on school campus. Actually, there's a good argument that it doesn't, because the standard would be very much, if not really exactly the same as it is today. If you read on page 5, starting below line 20, you can see that if a local board approves such a curriculum, this training program, an employee of that district, I won't read all of the words here, but an employee who completes the handgun safety course may request permission from the local board to carry a concealed handgun onto the real property, which is exactly what they do right now if they're hired as a security guard. And then in section 2 on page 6, a local board that has approved the sheriff's curriculum, you'll see if you read that, the local board or charter board may allow an employee to do that. It doesn't mean that if they go through the curriculum that they just get to do this no matter what the school board or the charter board says. You have to actually read the bill. We don't have to pass this to find out what's in it. We can read it. And if a school board wants to allow an employee, a charter board wants to allow an employee to be armed now, they may do that now. And if Senate Bill 5 becomes law, it doesn't mean that there's just instantly or over time more guns on campus. All of that is may with permission of the school board or the charter board, just like it is now. So could this lead to more people being armed? Yes, that's a possibility. Could it lead to more people being armed who are currently armed and not have to be hired as a security guard as well? Yeah, I could do that. Ask for an aye vote on Senate Bill 5.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, I want to thank the Majority Leader for bringing this bill. And I have to tell you that it has been one of the curious things in my time in the General Assembly that people thank others for bringing a bill before they vote no on their bill and thank them profusely. And that's not the case here. I want to thank the Majority Leader for bringing this bill because I, as an attorney who advises charter schools, need this bill. You have heard some say that this bill will lead to more guns in schools. I don't think it will, but I do want to ask, how many of you were here in 2014? Well, with the exception of the gentle lady from Denver, if you were here in 2014, you were one of the 34 senators who voted to extend 1812-214 to charter schools. It already permitted concealed carry by school employees that were employed for security purposes by school districts at the option of the school district. And the senator, to avoid confusion, the senator formerly known as Chairman Kagan was a co-sponsor of that bill, along with me. And after leaving the House, I went back to my office to continue my occupation and to do more of it. And my phone rang one day, and it was a charter school client that said, you know, we think they passed a law to allow us to employ security officers or take our staff and certain of our staff and designate them as security officers for concealed carry. And we'd like to consider doing that, but we'd like to do it right, and we'd like to know what the standards are. House Bill 14-1291 it was. And I began to do kind of a survey around the state, and I found some small districts, quite like my charter school client, that were in remote areas with long, difficult response times. And then the question was, how do we ensure that we have proper training? What are the standards? We want to ensure that we've dealt with safety, training standards, insurance requirements, and so forth. Well, it turns out that in House Bill 14-1291, this body and the other, by large majority votes, simply extended that to charter schools without any training requirement. It's there, it exists there. I believe it was the right thing to do. But when I saw Senate Bill 5 early in this session, I thought, Mr. Majority Leader, you have done what I did not have time to do, and you've spent some time doing what is important to do, which is ensure that school districts and charter schools who are going to avail themselves of this very important statutory program, which is to improve their school safety and security, have a model for training, for safety, and in doing so, improve the safety of their children, their teachers, and their community. So I find it curious that those who were co-sponsors of a bill that extended this to charter schools, and make no doubt about it, that by its very nature extended and made it more likely that there would be more schools. There are fully over 10% of our students in Colorado today are attending a charter school, that there would be more opportunities, if you will, to have school security officers, an administrator, a teacher, a coach who has a concealed carry permit to also have secondary duties as a school security officer. What is so important about this bill, and why I am so grateful to the Majority Leader, is it gives us the guidance we did not do in 2014 and had not been done for local districts before that. It gives us the guidance and a program. It authorizes the sheriffs. It encourages the sheriffs. I have to tell you, my advice to my client was we need to coordinate this with local law enforcement, and we need to know what their expectation is and what their level of training expectation would be. And so, Mr. Majority Leader, I thank you for bringing this bill. It is a bill that is overdue. It is a set of standards and requirements that we should have done in 2014 when so many of you were co-sponsors with me in extending the bill. And so I am glad that I have been able to return here to vote aye for the Majority Leader's bill to create standards for training, and increase safety. And I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, this bill is not necessary. We already have in statutes opportunities for school districts to choose personnel that they want to be able to be armed. We already heard the numbers. We have school districts that are already doing this. My question is, do we need a state statute on this? I would say no. I don't believe that more guns makes our schools and our communities safer. And for guns to be available for defense, they have to be accessible. So if we want more folks in our schools to have guns for defense, they have to be accessible. Now, what this bill does, it says that you can sign up, you can convert a school secretary to have a concealed carry permit. She can go ahead and do those kinds of things. Or it could be the janitor. It could be the bus driver. But basically, this is a very, very clever approach to increase guns in our schools. And we know that if you have these school personnel folks who take this minimum training, minimum, and when I've talked to law enforcement, when they're encountering some of these dangerous situations, SWAT teams, these people are trained to be able to navigate and handle that level of danger. Can you imagine a school secretary or a janitor who just have a concealed carry permit with minimal training to be able to handle a situation like that? I think that's very problematic. Teachers should not have the burden of also acting as law enforcement when they're in the classroom. Teachers in our schools are supposed to be environments where we're shaping the mind and building for the next generations of teachers and doctors and lawyers and other career options. We heard the good senator from Parker said something like, it's women. Women are asking for this. And I have spoken to many women, moms that demand action. I haven't had one single woman come up to me and say that the number one issue that we have in our rural schools is to arm a school secretary or a janitor or a bus driver. I haven't had one single woman asking me to increase access to guns in our schools. And I have rural schools in my Senate district. And you know what they're asking for? Internet access. They're asking for internet access. They're asking for good books. They're asking for us to close the achievement gap. I haven't had anyone in my district say that they want to increase training to provide more guns in school. Not one. Not one woman and not one man. This proposal is just another way of getting around the thought that more guns will make us safer. And that's just not true. When I think about all the things that we need to be training in K through 12, one of them is not about arming our school personnel. We need literacy coaches. We need more counselors. We need more nurses. When I talk to my superintendents and my principals at my rural schools, they're having difficulty recruiting math and science teachers.
Senator Fields, I've given a lot of leeway, but the bill is about training. Let's try and tie it back to the bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, we do not need more guns in schools. We need more teachers. I urge a no vote on Senate Bill 5.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, I just want to take a few minutes to talk about how I don't believe we need to train our teachers to carry a weapon. Our classrooms are a place of learning for our children. Our teachers are trained to teach. Law enforcement is trained to protect our community. I am genuinely concerned as a senator coming from a district where gun violence is so high. Sometimes in my district, the only safe haven my kids have is in a classroom. So it frightens me to think that when my kids go to school and the teacher has a weapon in her desk, I think that rises the opportunity for more violence. I know today we've come up in different days and times, but when we were in class, when we went to school, Senator Holbert, we didn't think about these things. We didn't think about whether or not our school was safe or if our kids were going to come home safe. And so I'm rising in opposition to this. Senator Andy Kerr mentioned the senator from Lakewood mentioned that there should be a larger voice in putting this policy together. And I want to thank the senator from Lakewood. But what I didn't hear is, where are the voices of the parents? Did the parents in Senate District 33 have an opportunity to give feedback on this policy before it was developed? I just think there'll be too many consequences if this bill passes. Too many unsafe consequences. Teachers and school safety experts oppose allowing guns in schools. The American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association, two of the largest teachers' organizations, oppose guns in schools. Members, let's keep the safe haven for our students in classrooms safe. Let's not put teachers in an environment where not only do they have to teach, but now they got to protect our kids. Let's let those who train protect our children. I ask you for a no vote on Senate Bill 5.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I come down in support of Senate Bill 5. I believe it's a very reasonable piece of legislation that puts in, actually it refines what is currently in law. In just a little bit of a historical context, that's what the old guy does. He comes down and gives you the historical context. That this was first put in place with Senate Bill 24 back in 2003. And as I say, I support Senate Bill 5 because it takes the law that was put in place, oh man, what was that, 15 years ago or 14, somewhere in there, and adds some, actually it adds some more guardrails in many respects. But back then, when the concealed carry statewide bill was passed, the one provision would be to allow school districts to authorize employees to carry concealed. You know, and it's really doesn't add a lot of, it leaves it up to the individual school districts on what that means. Well, Senate Bill 5 comes back and says, wait a minute, let's put some additional parameters on what that really means. I see it as very consistent with current law, you know, and if you go back and look at the history on it, in the House, which is where I was at the time, and a couple of others were here as well, it enjoyed bipartisan support. I believe the vote was 16 to 40, whatever the rest of the number would be, 40-something in favor, obviously. And so I'm not sure why we have such intense controversy on a bill that is taking current law and actually adding some guardrails, adding some refinement to it. I believe Senate Bill 5 is a good, prudent step forward that adds the current day reality to what was initially put in place back in 2003, and everybody who's in this room, who was in that room, actually voted for it back then.
Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be brief. We have a new Secretary of Defense, and he's known for being fairly to the point with his quotes. I've heard a lot of conversation here today about we don't need this, we don't need that. Safe haven, safe space. And General Mad Dog Mattis has one saying that I think we need to understand here it's a very important thing. The enemy always has a vote. The enemy always has a vote. And in this issue, the enemy is whoever is willing to come in and do harm to our children. We need to keep that in mind.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues. I know this is a hot topic, and many of us have different views and different thoughts and ideas about it. School safety is obviously a top priority for every one of us in this room. I think when I started looking at this bill and saying, as an educator, do I believe in training and education? Absolutely, yes. I think that's something that we are all in agreement to. The difference is that I believe districts, in partnership with law enforcement, can already do this. Do we need to impose this statewide and say this is the training that we believe needs to be done and how it's done? That's why local control is so beautiful in the state of Colorado. The good senator from Southeast Colorado who talked about his women teachers and female teachers saying, yes, we need to make sure we're trained. It's already happening. We've already heard about Hanover. We've already heard about different districts that have taken that initiative. We're going on an assumption that school districts are not believers in professional education and training for their employees. What a slap in the face to the professionalism of our educators, our school board members, and our law enforcement. These are people who are saying, don't put a gun in somebody's hand that isn't trained, that doesn't know what they're doing. So by us as a state coming along and saying, well, we're going to fix it for you folks, we're going to tell you what you need to do. Having the respect and the regard for professionalism, recognizing the fact that our rural districts may be a distance away from law enforcement, recognizing that, honoring that. That's the conversation we should be having. Not that we need to tell districts and school boards how to operate. They have been hired by, and school boards have been elected by, their constituency and by the parents to make those decisions. So my question is, at what point does trust come in? At what point do we say, we recognize in southeast Colorado that the distance is far enough that we need to make sure somebody is armed. We need to make sure that our children have some form of protection, as do any of our schools that have safety officers that are already in place. So those are comments I've been really pondering and thinking about. I don't think this is a matter of saying anyone in this room does not believe in training. Anyone in this room does not honor and believe the importance. My only regret, quite candidly, is I wish we were spending this much time talking about mental health and counselors in our schools to help our children, to help provide that service. And I know that's a whole nother topic, and I thank you for letting me say that because I'm stretching it a little bit. But I do believe that when we talk about, he's smiling, okay.
You're fine, I'm giving a lot of
But
leeway.
I do want to say that when we talk about protecting our children, it is not just with a gun. It is with wisdom, it is with compassion, and it is with preparation of how we are dealing with the children that we are facing in our classrooms today and the threats that are out there coming in. It isn't always an attack by a gun that is coming into our schools and in our children. I thank you for letting me speak. Again, I believe from the depth of my soul, districts and law enforcement can get the job done without us telling them what to do and letting each district decide how they're going to do this training. And quite honestly, when left to the expertise of those that are dealing with our children every day, they'll get the job done. They want to protect our children every bit as much of all of us. Thank you very much.
Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to respond. I count the good senator from Aurora as a friend, not just a colleague. Appreciate the time that we spent together on the Education Committee, and I have a very high level of respect, utmost respect for her. Just the suggestion that Senate Bill 5 is somehow a slap in the face to school districts or charter boards. The bill was originally introduced without those minimum standards. But the minimum standards that we adopted by amendment this morning are from those school districts that are already doing this. And in talking with those school districts and sheriffs, my question was, does this create a mandate? Does this offend you that we're putting in minimum requirements? Because my response there was, well, I laid this bill over Monday, asked for it to be laid over, in response to the Denver Post editorial saying it's an imperfect bill, there should be minimum standards. So I went out and asked those questions of people here in the Capitol and outside. Would it be a mandate? Would it be a burden if we adopt your current minimum standards from the self-insurance pool? And the response was no. Why? Because it's optional now, and it would be optional for them if Senate Bill 5 were to pass. If a district doesn't want to meet their current self-imposed standards, all they have to do with that district employee is hire them as a security guard, and they don't have to. So the reaction out in the world is that it's not a mandate. And I think it's worth noting that the self-insurance pool of the districts put that training program together not just for protection against liability, but potentially for lower insurance rates. These are realities in our state today, If Senate Bill fails, Senate Bill 5 fails, that's the reality. That doesn't change. And if it passes, it's the same. I ask for an aye vote on Senate Bill 5.
I'm sure the wait was worth it to Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I kind of come at this with objections that are not quite the same as my colleagues who spoke in opposition. Basically, I think this is wrong in its entirety. I think this bill sends a message that more guns in schools will make children safer. And I think that is wrong. More guns in school will not make our children safer. And teachers or anyone on school grounds should not be asked to take on the role of law enforcement or security guards. Teachers are in school to teach, and no amount of training is going to change that. I taught for 30 years. More than half of my career was in rural, tiny schools and school districts. So I think I have an understanding of their concerns, and I don't believe their concerns are on the ability to have a concealed carry weapon in their desk, you know, that special desk drawer that we'll create for that weapon. I think they're concerned about the things that the good senator from Aurora spoke of earlier. Also, I want to refer to the good senator from Berthoud. Actually, I think I'm a bit more ancient than he is. And so I want to bring us into some historical context. You know, our predecessors wrote and put into law 18-12-105.5, unlawfully carrying a weapon, unlawful possession of weapons, school, college, or university grounds. A person commits a Class 6 felony if such person knowingly and unlawfully and without legal authority carries, brings, or has in such person's possession a deadly weapon is defined, etc., etc. That was wise when that law was created. I think that law continues to be wise. And the fact that some districts have found a loophole around this law, I think means we should be bringing legislation to plug that loophole, not to expand it even wider. I hope you will vote in opposition to this bill. Thank you.
Senator Coram.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As someone who comes from rural Colorado, I want to give you my perspective. And I understand, my friends, that don't see the need for this. If I could walk the borders of my of my Senate district in a day, I would probably agree with you. Senator Fields, we came into the House together. I consider you a friend. But I want to respond to something you said about us wait for the SWAT team. In a lot of my district, the closest SWAT team is 3 to 4 hours away. The closest deputy sheriff may be an hour away. When I came into the House 6 years ago, the State Patrol told me that we will protect you. Anything happens in this building, we can have someone there within 30 seconds. There's a lot of difference between 30 seconds, 30 minutes, an hour, or 3 hours waiting for the SWAT team. I have districts in my Senate district that have voted to do this. And I'm fine with that. But I also want the security to know that they are properly trained. A couple of weeks ago, the Attorney General brought in a training program. Senator Lambert and I were there and took it. It was real. Senator Lambert, I watched his, and it is a school shooting scene. Senator from Colorado Springs. Thank you. But just witnessing that, it was terrifying. And I would be more comfortable if one of those school districts says, yes, we don't want to wait the 30 minutes minimum for the deputy. We have someone who is very qualified in the handling of a weapon. But let's make sure they have the proper training to do this. I ask for your support.
Senator Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, somebody was at the mic a few minutes ago advocating for the bill, said, let's keep our children safe. And I think we all have that at the root of all of this, right? We want to keep our children safe. But for me, I think more guns in schools does not make children safer. In fact, just the opposite. Now, you can talk to police officers that are highly trained, and they will tell you that when they get in firefights, things aren't clear often for them. Adrenaline's rushing, that kind of thing. And they're trained. But one thing that hasn't been talked about today, I don't think, is having the firearm in a school and how you store it. I know at that age, I had a curiosity about where that kind of thing was stored and where it would be. And that creates two problems. One is if kids get a hold of the firearm, do they accidentally shoot one another? Before Christmas, a 15-year-old shot his 14-year-old friend in Jefferson County. Now, he didn't do it in a school, but that happens. Can you imagine what's that like? What that is like? And the other thing is, I bet we all know somebody who took their life through suicide. I have 3 friends that have. 2 used guns, another asphyxiated himself. And that's why I'm involved in suicide prevention work. But having a firearm handy with some kid that's broken up with his girlfriend, or you name it, all sorts of things that adolescents and tweens and teens go through. And if that's not properly secured and you get a hold of it, it could result in them killing themselves right in the school when they might not have a firearm at home. So,
Senator Jones?
Yes, sir.
I'm given a lot of latitude, but please try to tie it back to the bill and training.
Well, I appreciate that. So I'm talking about having firearms in schools with teacher training and suicide and possible accidental shooting. So to wrap up, this does not make students safer, in my opinion. It makes them less safe. And in ways beyond just having somebody come into school and have to use the firearm, it's having the young people have the access to the firearm and having bad consequences. I ask for a no vote.
Members, just quickly before we continue the debate, I wanted to make sure that you understood from Mason's legislative manual that decorum in debate does say a member, in referring to another member, should avoid using the member's name, and we try to adhere to that here. So please keep that in mind. Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I've heard now several times people say that more guns in schools won't make us safer. I take the opposite. I think less guns in schools won't make us safer. I'd rather have the guns in the hands of well-qualified, trained individuals, such as teachers, that can pass the training, know how to use the firearm, protecting our students. I think that makes us safer. I'm very proud of the school district in Weld County. I believe we were the first ones to arm teachers. Briggsdale School District has been arming teachers now for a while, and they did ask for it. It wasn't anybody else. The school came to me. The teachers asked for it. The women teachers asked for it. And I asked them, why do you want to arm your teachers? And their response was very simple. We heard it already, because it will make our kids safer. We live in a rural area, and the sheriff's office can't be everywhere. And it's true. To get to Briggsdale from Greeley, 40 minutes. We have another school district that's even further away that could take over an hour to get to. So that's true. So if my kids were going to that district, I would want a teacher, a well-qualified individual, to be able to stop any threat. And that's what they would do. As sheriff, as you all know, only sheriffs can issue concealed carry permits. And I issued my share. As a matter of fact, some of the chiefs accused me of having a drive-through window. But we were making a big deal out of our 10,000th concealed carry. Guess who, just by happenstance, was the 10,000th person to come get their concealed carry permit? A teacher from Briggsdale, a female teacher from Briggsdale. And so we had this little confetti party and congratulated her, and she said, "This is awesome. This will help me with my students, to help keep them safe." Again, we can't be everywhere. And so I asked for support for this bill. But I think we've gotten off target a little bit in that this isn't really about more guns or less guns in school. It's about training. This bill is totally about training and how do we protect our students by getting the best qualified, trained teachers to protect them. Because when we send our kids to that school, they're under their care and custody. And I want that teacher caring for my kids. So I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Marino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, I served on the School Safety and Youth in Crisis Committee, along with my colleague, the good senator from Lakewood, and the former senator that made all the announcements. And this bill that we have in front of us today is not a recommendation that came out of that committee. That is one of the most difficult committees that I have ever served on. Hearing stories from families and parents that lost children in acts of school violence. But what amazed me even more about that committee was that these parents and these families didn't advocate for training to carry a gun in a school. They didn't advocate that only if someone else had a gun, had a weapon, they could have stopped that shooter and maybe my child would be alive today. That's not what they said. Actually, what they said is let's have more training for mental health. Let's have more training for counselors. Let's get people the help that they need. Let's find those shooters, those people who are struggling, that need help and can't find it anywhere else. That, to me, is where we should be going. But that's not the bill we have in front of us today. And for that reason, I ask for a no vote.
Senator Martinez-Humenick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, one of the things I would just like you to take a moment and think about is Columbine. I had a friend whose daughter was killed at Columbine. And I wonder, had the teachers had this opportunity to be properly trained, and had that district at the time allowed this, which we know districts are doing this anyway, would that have happened? I don't know. And can we speculate what would have happened? No, none of us will ever know. But there were 24 people that day that were either injured or were killed. And so think about that too. If school districts are going to let folks do this, and I will remind everyone they are already doing this, is it okay for someone just to watch a video and the school district to determine that that's adequate training? I don't know. That's a tough decision each one of us in this room has to make. Or should we have a standardized system of training that people have to go through with the sheriffs? I substitute teach. I've been an educator. We all know that the reality of what happens in our schools is much different than it was when we were all growing up. Things are different. And yes, we need to put resources and try to figure out how to get more counselors in the schools and more mental health issues addressed. But we don't have control over other people's actions. And so I have talked to teachers that are in rural areas that say, you know, if we have an incident here, our sheriff won't be able to get here for 40 minutes or 25 minutes. And by then, who knows if it's going to be another incident in a small rural school that is similar to Columbine. I would hope not. So I just wanted you to think about that as you are contemplating what you're going to vote on today.
Mr. President. Oh, Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember Columbine. The school I was teaching in at the time is in the same school district. It's about less than 10 miles, maybe about 6 or 7 miles away from the school I was teaching at. The entire district went into lockdown at that time. All of us who were teachers, I wasn't a parent yet, but I know every parent in Jeffco who had a kid in school at that time remembers Columbine. We went into lockdown. We did turn on TVs. One of my colleagues had a child at Columbine who was not harmed, but of course, at the time, just seeing the video clips from the helicopter overhead, there's no way to know who was all right and who wasn't all right. You can identify anyone. So those of us who are teachers, we definitely remember Columbine. Things could have been different. There's been a lot of discussion since Columbine. Columbine was seen as definitely a watershed moment. It changed the discussion around school safety, around guns in schools. And the former speaker is correct. If this bill had been in place, if some of the laws we passed over the last decade and a half, almost 2 decades, had been in place, things might have been different. We don't know. But what I do know is that additionally, over the last few decades, this body and the House and who's ever been governor over the last 2 decades have changed a lot of laws around what the duty of a teacher is. Not just around the safety aspects, but what a teacher is supposed to know and be able to do, raise the standards of what students are supposed to know and be able to do. And we have passed law after law after law, taking away local control from our districts, mandating standards on teachers. And that's just around curriculum. That's just around measuring teachers. And so with all of that, in addition to that, the notion that we're going to be training our teachers to a degree at which they are able to assess a situation like Columbine, where professional law enforcement spent hours and hours reacting to a situation. And one thing that I would make very clear is that how law enforcement reacted at Columbine with the training that was in place at the time and under the circumstances, that law enforcement did an excellent job at that time. Things have changed. As I said, it was a watershed moment. Nationally and here in Colorado, we have changed. Before that, we would have the occasional fire drill at our school, and we would know what a lockdown was. But since that time, all teachers in Colorado, and I would say even nationally, have undergone extensive training of what it means to do a lockdown, what it means to do a lockout, how to react in those kinds of situations. At the same time, law enforcement, the Columbine was not just a watershed moment for schools and school personnel and school safety. It was also a watershed moment for law enforcement. And that law enforcement also, the training for law enforcement today is very different, especially in a school shooting and a school safety situation. And I'm sure all of you have seen and heard about some of these cases where somebody goes in to get trained how to react in a live fire situation. And the experts that say over and over again, this is not something for the layperson. This is not something for somebody who isn't 110% committed to the full training that it takes to be able to react and react well in a situation like that. And so I think about the different jobs different people have. Teachers and what we expect of them in the classroom, law enforcement and what we expect of them, our military in protecting our country. And the mindset and the way that we want these different professions to do their jobs and to do them well. There are, in my experience, there are examples of folks who used to be in the military who then retired from the military and became teachers and became great teachers. I've worked with many of them. That's great. I know teachers who went on into the military. And all these people will tell you that the training that they receive in the military is vastly different than the training you receive as a teacher, because they are very different jobs. So I found it was interesting that that General James Mad Dog Mattis was brought up, and some quotes from him, and by all accounts, a Marine's Marine, and that is very popular with the Marines. This is one of his most famous quotes. Be polite, be professional, but have a plan to kill everybody you meet. Is that the mindset we want of a Marine protecting the United States? Absolutely. Is that the mindset that you want your kindergarten teacher to have every day they go to school? I don't think so.
Senator Neville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a little emotional for me when we hear the word Columbine, because most people have an opinion. And that's everyone's right. Everybody has an opinion about an important issue like that and what happened. To me, it falls a little closer to home, because I had a son and I knew most of those people who perished that day and had a relationship with them. It is frustrating to hear these opinions being used possibly in a political fashion. One thing I can tell you that's not an opinion, when I had the opportunity in 2012 to sit down at a school accountability committee meeting and discuss issues and discuss legislation, especially legislation around the Second Amendment. Didn't get much information back at that meeting. However, I had three teachers from Columbine come to me immediately after the meeting and asked to meet with me. And their comment was they wished they had the opportunity to protect what they treasure, those students, protect their lives, and they were willing to do that. Regarding training, this bill addresses training. So please, let us not set up straw man arguments when it comes to something so serious. I request an aye vote.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, previous speaker said this is about training. It's exactly what this is. Any effort to divert from that is simply not the case. This is about training. We see several schools. The majority leader mentioned one of those schools, the Hanover district in my Senate district, has opted to allow someone to carry within the school and are developing the training to do that. That exists now in current law. They are allowed to do that already. What this is doing is saying, if you're going to do that as a statewide policy, currently, if you don't hire a post-certified person, then you are capable right now of hiring someone with zero training to do that. When this bill becomes law, we're saying it's no longer zero training, it's something greater than zero, and they have to work that out with the Sheriff's Department, the law enforcement within that district in order to institute that training program for that district as they see fit. This is simply about training, training, training.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is the adoption of Senate Bill 5. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. No. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 5 is indeed adopted. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the balance of the second reading calendar lay over until Monday, February 6th.
The question before us is laying over the balance of the calendar until Monday. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The calendar will indeed be laid over. Mr. Majority Leader. Motion to rise and report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee rise and report.
Question before us is whether the committee should rise and report. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The committee will indeed rise and report.
Senate will come back to order. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee has met and taken under consideration two bills. Mr. Carpenter, would you please read the report?
Mr. President, your committee of the whole begs leave to report has had under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and makes the following recommendations thereon. Senate Bill 65 is amended. Senate Bill 5 is amended, passed on second reading, and order engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 59, Senate Bill 7 laid over until 2/6/2017 and retaining their place on the calendar.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Mr. President, I move the adoption of the report.
The motion before us is the adoption of the report to the committee of the whole. There is an amendment on the desk. Will the clerk please read amendment number 1 to the committee of the whole?
Amendment number 1 in the Committee of the Whole. This Bill 5. Senator Kern Finberg moved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Cow Amendment 1 to the Committee of the Whole report.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the amendment, the printed amendment about the School Safety and Youth and Crisis Committee. This is the one that says the sheriff shall ensure that the training course is approved by the School Safety and Youth and Crisis Committee, created in Section 22. So one of the things in my motion to send this bill to the School Safety and Youth and Crisis Committee, I would mention that would slow the process down of trying to get this training in place. I don't see why we couldn't do a dual track here, have Senate Bill 5 continue through the system, and as has been spoken about, will put in statute the training programs these training programs have to be created, and at the same time, since this committee, the School Safety and Youth and Crisis Committee has already been created. They're a member. I'm a current member of it. I believe the senator from Arvada is another current member. I'm not sure who all are the other current members, but we can go ahead and be meeting. We come down here Monday through Friday every week for the next 100 or so days anyway. So we could meet on a Friday afternoon, perhaps, and start vetting this, and as Senate Bill 5 makes its way through the process. Earlier, I read all of the charges of the committee. I won't do that again. I just wanted to highlight two why the committee was created: to study issues relating to school safety and the prevention of threats to the safety of students, teachers, administrators, employees, and volunteers who are present on the grounds of each public and private school in the state. And then a little bit further down, also to study any statutory provisions that may require modification to reflect local community circumstances and standards. I believe that's exactly where Senate Bill 5 is going. That's the parts of Senate Bill 5 that I agree with, and I would like to see our sheriffs, as they're consulting with the school boards, that they are using are approving a training system that our School Safety and Youth and Crisis Committee has looked at as well. I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I ask for a no vote on the report to the amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole. I believe that, well, not I believe, the school districts, the charters that are using this current training program don't need permission from the School Safety Committee now, and they wouldn't if Senate Bill 5 becomes law. If the committee wants to take up conversation about the current training program that school districts have designed for themselves, I suppose they could take up that conversation. But to require a sheriff to comply when that sheriff, in my opinion, is the expert on what training should be required, and the local control, respect in our Constitution to our school districts, I think that this is an unnecessary amendment and ask for a no vote.
Is there any further discussion on Cow Amendment 1? Question before the body is the adoption of Amendment 1 to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Are there any no votes? Senator Holbert. Senator Scott. Senator Priola. Senator Smallwood. Senator Tate. Senator Lambert. Senator Martinez-Humenick. Senator Gardner. Senator Coram. Senator Lundberg. Senator Neville. Senator Marble. Senator Cook. Senator Hill. Senator Crowder. Senator Baumgardner. Senator Sonnenberg. Please add the President. With a vote of 17 ayes, 18 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, that amendment is lost. Motion before the body is the adoption of the report to the Committee of the Whole. Are there any no votes? Seeing none, with a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, the Committee of the Whole report is adopted. Consideration of governor's appointments.
Members of the Fire and Police Pension Association Board of Directors for terms expiring September 1st, 2020. Tyson Lynn Worrell of Lakewood, Colorado, to serve as representative of full-time paid police officers reappointed. Adalberto Antonio Guy Torres III of Littleton, Colorado, to serve as a member of the state's financial or business community with experience in investments appointed.
And colleagues, this is the governor's appointments and consent calendar. Majority Leader Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the consideration of governor's appointments consent calendar consisting of Tyson Lynn Worrell of Lakewood and Alberto Antonio Guy Torres of Littleton to the Fire and Police Pension Association Board of Directors.
Effie, can you give me a calendar that has that stuff on it? Thank you. Is there any discussion? The motion is the adoption of the governor's appointments listed on the consent calendar. Are there any no votes? Seeing none, the vote of 35 aye, 0 no, 0 absent, 0 excused. Tyson Lynn Worrell of Lakewood, Colorado is appointed to serve as a representative of full-time paid police officers in the Fire and Police Pension Association Board of Directors. Okay. Signing of bills. Signing of bills. Thank you. My apologies, colleagues. I didn't read far enough down the paper. Also appointed to the Fire and Police Pension Association Board of Directors, Adalberto Antonio Guy Torres III of Littleton, Colorado, to serve as a member of the state's financial or business committee with experience in investments, and is appointed. And very quickly, Mr. Carpenter, before you continue on there. Senate Bill 14 passed the second reading, order engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 65 is amended. Senate Bill 5 is amended, passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 59, Senate Bill 7 laid over until February 6, 2017, retaining their place on the calendar. Signing of bills.
The President has signed House Joint Resolution 1005, 1006, 1007, 1008, 1009, 1010, 1011, 1012.
Announcements. Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Majority Leader asked me to just comment one more time on the use of personal names when we are in the well, and to kind of help our new members that are not used to that. Please refrain from using a person's name when you're in the well. Thank you very much. I knew this wouldn't work.
Any further announcements? Senator Cook. Senator Lundberg first, and then we'll do yours.
Joint.
Oh, joint. Okay.
All right, colleagues, I want to express heartfelt condolences to RTD. They lost
Would you like
an
to
officer.
request a moment of personal privilege on this,
oh,
Senator Cook? Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sorry. Moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you. The other day, Tuesday night, an officer from RTD was killed at Union Station helping two women. And they suspect that he was killed because he was wearing a uniform similar to what Denver wears. The man just walked up to him and put a gun to his neck and shot him for no reason. His name is Scott Van Lincoln, and he's been with RTD for a little while. He was a devoted pastor who tried to help many people. He was 56-year-old married father from Loveland and a former police officer from Wisconsin. And so again, my heartfelt condolences to RTD, and not just to them, but to the city of Denver, because he was there to protect us, and to the state of Colorado. It's another loss. And he was from Loveland, so I'll turn it over to Senator Lundberg.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I, too, request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Just a brief quote about Scott Van Lincoln. He was a very fervent man and loved God, loved people, tried to help a lot of people. He was always trying to find ways to encourage and bless a lot of people. A very dedicated man to the gospel. And that was written by somebody who knew him. He was from my district, and I'm joining Senator Cook in asking that we have a moment of silence in recognition of this man who, you know, behind a badge, essentially, gave his life for the community.
At the Senator's request, would you please join the Senators in the well with a moment of silence?
Thank you.
Thank you, Senators. Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. President. RTD and Allied Universal has set up a memorial fund to help him and his wife and his two children through the Rocky Mountain Law Enforcement Credit Union under Scott Van Lincoln's name. And you can look up, if you'd like to help, donate to his wife and kids, their website, and find out where to give. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senators. Are there any other announcements? Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we recess today until 1:30 p.m.
And with that, I believe, let the Senators know that we will not require them back. We'll just be reading bills across the desk.
Yes, except the senators that cannot help but use people's names. Everybody else is free to go.
The motion before the body is to recess until 1:30 p.m. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. We will be in recess till 1:30 p.m.